Welcome back to our introductory session on teaching with three-dimensional design in Tinkercad. My name is Jennifer Robb, and in this section we're going to revisit some of the features that you saw in the tutorials, as well as a few hints and tricks that can help you create really interesting designs in Tinkercad. When you've finished the tutorials and are ready to create your first design, you'll want to first head back to your home dashboard, which you can do quite easily by clicking on the Tinkercad Autodesk logo in the upper left-hand corner. From here, along the left of your screen, click on where it says Designs, and then the blue button in the upper right that says New, and then 3D Design. This will take you to the blank Tinkercad space. Although it looks very simple, there's a lot going on here. I'm going to go through it with you in the work environment here, but if you need a reminder, there are several diagrams in the slides that I gave you. Some of these will have come up for you while you were going through these tutorials, so it may be a bit of a refresher, but it can be helpful to see and work with it all together. First, I want to talk about the view options. These are really important because when you're making something in a three-dimensional environment, you're going to want to look at your design from all angles to make sure that things are lined up the way you want them. The first of these tools is the View Cube. You can use this a couple of different ways, as you saw in the tutorial. You can click and drag on the cube to spin your work plane, or you can single click on the labels, edges, or corners to see your design from a particular angle. For example, if I click on top, I'll be looking at my design from the top down. If I click on one of the corners, I can see my design from more of a corner angle. Especially when your designs are made up of multiple objects put together, you'll need to look at things from different angles to make sure everything lines up. Below the View Cube, there are several other viewing options. The top option that looks like a house is the Home View. This is the default view that you had when you first created a new design. If ever you want to return to this view, you can click that button. Below that, the icon that looks like the four corners of a square is the Fit All in View button. If I click it now, it won't do anything because I don't have anything on my screen. But if I drag in a shape here, and then click that button, you'll see that it tries to give me the closest view of my entire design that it can. This is really helpful, especially if you're building something and you happen to lose a piece of your design off the work plane, which sounds like it shouldn't happen, but it definitely does. For example, if I was trying to make a house and I dragged this roof onto my screen, but I wound up putting it way back there, and I happened to be zoomed in really far and I couldn't find it, I could click that Fit All in View button, and now I can see my entire design. And I can see where the roof went, and I can either move it or delete it or do whatever I need to do with it. The plus and minus buttons below that are for, of course, zooming in and out, which you can also do with the plus and minus buttons on your keyboard. And finally, the bottom button here is for the flat view or the orthographic view. Clicking on this will remove the perspective from your design, so we can see that it is just a flat cube from each angle. You can click on it again to switch back to the default view if you prefer the look of that. Depending on what you're working on, sometimes one view can be easier than the other. Moving away from the viewing options, this big blue square is your work plane. This is where you'll be creating your designs. If you want to change any of the grid options or the snapping options, you can modify those in the lower right corner. Moving up to the top on the right-hand side of your screen, there are a few other tools here that can be helpful. First is this ruler tool. You can click and drag this onto your work plane like you've done with the shapes from the Shapes library, and then select a shape that you want to measure, and it will show you the length, width, and height of that shape, as well as the spacing from the corner of this ruler here. And you can see it change as I move that around. That can be really helpful if you need to space things apart a certain way while you are creating your design. The other tool up here that is very important is the Notes tool. This can be a really good way for students to demonstrate their learning for you as they're creating their designs. Similar to the ruler, you can click and drag the notes tool anywhere onto your work plane or onto your shape, and then it pops up a little dialog box where you can enter some text. Again, this can be really helpful for students to explain some of the educational concepts that they're using in their designs, or simply explain parts of their designs that maybe aren't obvious right away. By default, you will always see the basic shapes first, but if you click on that text, there are many different categories of shapes that you can use, including creatures and characters, hardware if you want to create things to assemble items, as well as some featured collections, which contains some really cool, interesting objects from museums and from art galleries that you can explore. Now we're going to focus on the tools in this top bar from left to right. First is your copy tool. Like using Ctrl-C on your keyboard, you can use this to copy a shape that you've selected. Next to that is your paste tool, again like Ctrl-V on your keyboard. The next tool, with 3 different squares stacked on top of each other, is your duplicate tool. If you want to easily create copies of an object, select your shape and then click this tool. And then you can move the duplicate out of the way. Beside that is the delete tool, to delete a selected shape. Again, similarly, you can use the delete button on your keyboard. And just to the right of the trash bin are the very important undo and redo buttons. The thing with making is that you're going to make mistakes, and in a digital environment that is perfect because it is so easy to undo something and change it. So remember, these are here, or you can use your keyboard shortcuts of Ctrl-Z and Ctrl-Y for undo and redo. Moving to the right side of the bar here, the first button here with little speech bubble with what looks like an eyeball in it is to toggle the visibility of your notes. So if you've created notes in your design, or your student has created notes in their design, but maybe there's a lot of notes and they're kind of in the way, you can click this button to hide those. And you'll see that there's a little slash through it that tells you that you've hidden something, so you can remember to turn that back on. If you have any hidden shapes in your design, which I'll go ahead and hide this cube, this light bulb will be available, and that will tell you can show everything that's been hidden. I don't use this too often, but if you're making something with a lot of shapes, it may be useful to hide some while you're working on others, and that will bring them back for you. Next to that, you have the group and ungroup buttons. Once you finish assembling a piece of your design, and I'll go ahead and drag something else onto my work plane here just to demonstrate that, it can be helpful to group them so you don't accidentally make changes to a part of your design that you didn't intend. So what you can do to group things, and you would have learned this in your tutorials, is you can hold down the shift button on your keyboard and click on each of the items while holding down that shift button that you want to group. And we'll see that this group option then becomes available. Once I click on that, the 2 objects that I've assembled become one, and any changes I make are reflected in the entire design instead of just changing one of the pieces of my design. If I've changed my mind, maybe I think I messed up and I need to change something, I can click on that group and the ungroup button becomes available to me. So I can simply ungroup, change what I need to change, maybe I don't want this sphere after all, and then I'm ready to go. This next button is your alignment tool, which you also learned about in the tutorials. This can be really helpful for lining up different objects in a certain way. To use this, as you saw in the tutorial, all you need to do is select both of the objects or all of the objects you wish to line up, and then activate that tool. And you'll see different options for lining up your objects on the X, Y, and Z axes. Now you'll see as you hover over each of these nodes, it'll show you how it's going to line up your objects. So you have a preview in advance and you don't accidentally line them up the wrong way. Even with that preview, it can be easy to do something really weird and have your objects in a space that you didn't mean for them to be. So make sure to have that undo button handy. The button with the 2 triangles on either side of the line here is your mirror button. If you need to flip a shape, and we'll find something that looks just a little bit different so that we can flip it. If you need to flip a shape, you can simply select it, click on this button, and then click on the arrows showing which way you want to flip it. So with this heart here, for example, I'm hovering over all my different options here. Maybe I need to flip it that way. I can very easily mirror my object across, again, the X, Y, and Z axes. The other button I want to mention here is the Collaborate button, up to the left of your profile picture. This is the silhouette of a person with a plus sign next to it. And this will allow you to create a link to invite someone else or multiple people to come and work on your design with you. Those people will also need to have a Tinkercad account, but once they have that, they can join you with this link. Finally, there are 3 more sections of the workspace that I'd like to point out to you before we move on. First is the file name. This appears in the upper left corner of your screen beside the Tinkercad logo. By default, Tinkercad puts a couple of random words together to create a unique file name, but you can click on this once to change it to whatever makes sense to you. These other couple of tools are for dealing with models outside of Tinkercad. So the first is import. If you ever find or create a model outside of Tinkercad that you maybe just want to make a couple of changes to, or if you've created a picture that you want to turn into a 3D model, you can import it into Tinkercad. If you click on that button, you'll get this dialog box popping up, and it'll tell you that it accepts STL, OBJ, and SVG files. These are common files for 3D modeling or for laser cutting. If you have those on your computer, you can click Choose a File and load it here, or you can click Import from URL if you know of a file on the web that you can import. The other option here is exporting. So once you're finished with your design and you really want to take it somewhere else, like CoSpaces or like Minecraft, you can export it. So once again, if you click on Export, it shows you a few different file formats that you can export in, and some are for 3D printing and others are for laser cutting. Make sure that the circle next to everything in the design is filled in, otherwise you may be exporting just a single small part of your design. Once that's clicked, you can export it in whatever file format you need to match your purposes. For some 3D printers, you can also click on this option up here that says 3D print, and you can send it directly to a particular printer. Be sure before you export your design for 3D printing that you've grouped all of your objects together. In some cases, 3D printers may not read the file properly if you have objects all over the place and not connected, so you may want to make sure that you group your final design together and that you're ready to print. So those are the very basics, but there's some other options using your mouse that I just wanted to make you aware of pretty quickly. So in addition to your view options on the left side of your screen here, if you hold right-click on your mouse or trackpad and drag anywhere on the workplane, you can also rotate your design, which in some cases is easier than moving and using the view cube and coming back. Left-clicking on an object, of course, will select it, and left-clicking and dragging on that object will move it. You may notice that when you left-click and drag something, you accidentally grab one of these little boxes, or handles as we call them. These are for resizing your object, as you would have seen in your tutorials. Use the black handles to resize in one dimension, or the white handles to resize in multiple directions. You can also left-click and drag this little black cone on top to elevate parts of your design off the workplane if you need to stack things or move things around. You'll also see that if you hover your mouse over any of these handles, they change color to red, so you'll know that you're going to accidentally be changing the size rather than moving an object. If you're using a mouse with a scroll wheel on it, you can also use that to zoom in and out. And finally, if you hold that scroll wheel button down and drag, you can move the workplane to wherever you need it. Okay, we are done with the basics. Now time for some extra tips and tricks. And if you'd like to follow along with me, feel free to open up a new design in Tinkercad to try some of these tools. One of the trickiest things to do in Tinkercad is getting objects to line up with one another exactly the way that you want them. However, the Workplane tool makes that incredibly easy. Say I want to turn this red cube just into a simple little house. I want to put a roof on top of it, and I could do that by dragging it onto my screen here and changing my view, raising it off the work plane, and trying to place it exactly where I need to, but as you can see, that doesn't always work. An easier way to do this is with the Workplane tool, and that gives you a new work plane. By default, any shape that you drag onto Tinkercad will place it flat on the work plane. So if you want to put something on a different surface, you can simply turn it into a new work plane. To do that, like all the other tools, we're going to click and drag this work plane onto our cube, and you can see that it shows up on different faces here. So I want a roof, so I'm going to put it on top of my cube, and if I rotate around here, I can see where it has placed that new work plane. Now when I drag the triangular prism onto it, it's much easier to put it directly on top. And I still have to rotate around a little bit. I did a pretty good job there lining it up, but it's possible I could have put it somewhere else accidentally, and I just need to rotate around a little bit until I get it placed where I need it to be. When you're done with that work plane, you simply reselect it and put it back on where the blue work plane used to be, and it'll take that second work plane away. And that's a really easy way to line things up. You may also want to create holes in your design. Say if you were creating a keychain or a necklace charm and you needed a hole to loop the chain through, or in this case where we have a house, maybe we want to make some windows for it. The basic shapes library in Tinkercad gives you a couple of options here, a cube and a cylinder that are already holes that you can drag into your design and create a hole in that shape. But the nice thing is that you can turn any of these shapes in the library into a hole. So say we're feeling a little funky and we want star shapes in our house for windows. What I'm going to do here again is I'm going to create a new work plane so it's easy for me to put the window right on side of the house here. And then in my shapes library, I'm going to scroll down until I find the star. And I'm going to try to line it up pretty close. Now that's pretty big, so I'm going to just quickly resize that down and make it a reasonable size. And since I still have my work plane here, it's easy to line it up with the side of the house. Now to create a hole, I need to push it into this shape a little bit so I can make a hole. So I'll use my elevation tool for that. I'll select my star and move my view so I can see this black little cone, and I'll click and drag that down just until I see the star has gone into the house a little bit. Now I can select that star, click on hole, and we've got a star-shaped window or hole in the side of our house. You're not quite done at this point. I'm just going to move my work plane so I can see a little bit better. For the hole to be cut out of your shape, you actually need to group them together. It's kind of like a cookie cutter. We've put the cookie cutter in, but we actually need to take it out now so that we have our cookie design. So to do that, I'm just going to click on my star hole here and click on the red cube, that's the body of my house, and I will group them. And now you can see there's a star-shaped hole in the side of the house for a window. In addition to the large shapes library that we have here, there are also some special shapes that you can create that I want to show you real quick before we move on. The first special tool is in the basic shapes library here, and that is your Scribble tool. If you drag this onto your work plane, it opens up a new screen where you can actually draw any shape that you want. Maybe you really want a cool splatter shape that isn't available by default in the Tinkercad library. So you draw what you like here, and it'll show you a preview of what that shape will look like on your work plane. Maybe you want to change something about it, like make some of these lines a little bit thicker, or put something in the middle of it. and you can see the changes you're making in real time. When you're finished making your drawing, you can come down here and click on Done, and it'll have generated that shape for you on your work plane. If ever you want to change it, you can double click, go back in, and change anything you might want to change. I'll just delete that to get it off of my work plane. There's also some really interesting shape generators where you can create more complex shapes. To find these, you can click on Basic Shapes to get your menu and go all the way down to the bottom where you see Shape Generators. You can explore these as you wish on your own time, but there's a couple that I wanted to highlight for you. First is this green hyperboloid. If I drag this onto my work plane, we'll see a few different options in our Shapes Inspector here. Now play around with changing the different options here, but you'll see if I drag this outer radius slider, the top and bottoms of my shape get bigger or smaller. If I drag this inner radius slider, I can make all sorts of cool funky things. So you can change your options there and play around as you like to see what you can create. The other interesting shape generator is the extrusion shape. It looks just like a charcoal cylinder, but when we drag this onto our work plane, we see kind of a different shapes inspector here. We can drag these handles here to create all sorts of interesting things, including changing the angle and opening those up a little bit. And this can help us create some more complex shapes without having to create holes and cut them and do all sorts of complicated things. This is a really cool way to make complex shapes. As I mentioned, there are a few other shapes generators in here where you can create custom shapes, so feel free to explore these at your own time. Finally, once you're finished with your design, there are a couple of different ways you can save it, which will be important for the assignment I'm going to ask you to do. First, you can save an image of your design. To do this, click on this button in the top corner here that says Send To, and then this little button here that says Download Locally to save it to your computer. This will download the current view of your workspace, so before you download this picture, make sure you've gone in and centered your design so you can see everything. Pick the best angle before you save your picture. You can also, again, export your design to bring it into another program like CoSpaces or Minecraft or 3D Print It, which I talked about earlier. Okay, that was a heavy section with a lot of information. When you're ready, move on to the next video where I will introduce your assignment for this session.